Today's stage at the Tour de France was the fastest ever tour stage in history, made even more impressive because it was won by Søren Wærenskjold, who yesterday was the rider finishing dead last on the stage. Yesterday, Søren Wærenskjold having an extremely tough day out there, crashed, injured, back on his bike, battled to the end, last man standing on the road. They talked to him before the start line today, and he said he was going to really have to channel some mental energy and get his mindset right for the finish. And wow, there are so many strong mental takeaways from this performance, from this rider on the fastest ever stage in tour history. The one I want to talk about today is this ability to switch between flow and clutch states. When we talk about flow and clutch, we often think about flow as letting it happen. Clutch is making it happen. And there was a long time when we sort of thought that flow was the optimal performance state, that arriving at an optimal performance state was all about getting into flow state. And we needed to really arrive at this effortless, automatic, almost trance-like state where we didn't remember that was how we got the best out of ourselves. But since then, we know that that is not true. There is also this contrasting states and some gray area in between flow, but there's also clutch. And clutch is kind of not the opposite of flow, but different in that it's deliberate, it's gritty, it's driven, extremely focused, high energy intensive, very thoughtful and exerted. And our ability as performers to be able to switch between flow and clutch states is a hallmark mental performance tool of anyone that is successful at performing. At today's stage of the Tour de France, this skill was called on frequently as these guys were hauling, averaging almost 51 kilometers per hour through the stage. It was still 3 hours long, but there were periods out there where they were just zooming along and they're not tuning out. They're not letting go, but they're essentially flowing. Their skills and their resources are nicely matched with the challenge environment and the challenge level. And it does become this sort of automatic state of performance. And that's needed to get through stages like this at the tour. But then it's also needed is at the right moment, at the right time to switch into this clutch state, knowing that instead of just letting it happen, we're actually going to make it happen. And these stages in the Tour de France, in my experience, this switch happens often. There's, anytime you come through a city, anytime a gap opens up, sometimes we have to switch into that real forceful, gritty, I'm going to make it happen now. I'm going to close this gap. I'm going to get across. But absolutely today at the finish, Søren Wærenskjold switching from that flow to clutch performance at the perfect time. And it wasn't all clutch or all flow in that sprint. In this sprint especially, you saw that group bunching from the small road, it getting really cagey in timing, and it was kind of a big mess. Heard him once again describing it as the casino. In those moments, you can't force it. No matter how good you are, you can't force your way out. You can't push your way out. So it's all about flowing, feeling it, finding the wheel, sensing the right time. But then when that opportunity did arrive for Søren Wærenskjold, he was the most efficient and effective at switching into that clutch performance state. And this is something that we can all practice. It's not the same as doing it in the Tour de France, of course, but we can find ourselves out there in training and break this down. So in flow state, once again, we want the challenge matched up to our skills and resources, and we want to get immersed in our performance and the process and how it's going with a very open-ended goal. So a more process-oriented goal. And that helps us contribute to this flow state. And then from there, we can switch to a clutch state, which is not an open-ended goal, but a very specific closed-ended goal. So it's this power, this point in the climb, this finish line, this speed to here, this effort to here. And that pulls us towards this clutch state. And this ability to switch back and forth is something that is going to be valuable regardless of the performance environment we're in. Even if we're giving a speech and for part of the speech, we have to get into our rhythm, find the flow. But if there's a key part of this speech or a key part of the presentation where we really have to drive the point home, it requires us to be a little more deliberate, intelligent, and forceful and focused and effortful in that. So a skill that we can apply to sport as well as life, and one that was really on display today: flow, letting it happen versus clutch, making it happen. Thanks for tuning in and watching this mental performance takeaway from the tour. We'll have more in the coming stages.